So, a while back, I started learning how to code on the internet and decided to give game development a try. I created this 2D endless runner game, Fancy a Run, with Unity. It was pretty bad, but I've learned a lot since then, so I thought it might be fun to revisit this project and see what I could do to improve it. One of the big problems with Fancy a Run was that the platform path that the player walks along was not very interesting. There was always only one pathway to walk on. There wasn't much height variation, and the platform path was running right through the middle of the screen, effectively cutting the playable game area in half. All the platform generation in the game is managed by a script attached to a game object. First, I adjusted the land manager to spawn land at the bottom of the screen. This opened up the gameplay area like I wanted, creating a lot more space. But just having one level of platforms at the same height all the time is not very exciting for the player either. So I adjusted the land manager some more and created a system that would allow for branching of the path. There would always be a steady stream of platforms being created on the base level, but now the game occasionally created series of platforms leading upwards, giving the player more options. This took me a while. I had to restructure the code quite a bit. Using prefabs for the platforms was essential. Another fix that was badly needed was an update to the pause system. My pause system could only be activated by clicking a button in the game window. This is slow and clunky, especially in a game where the player spends most of their time with their hands on the keyboard. Having to switch over to the mouse and click was not ideal. So I did the more traditional thing and made it activated by pressing the escape key. This was kind of a problem though on itch.io for anyone who was playing the game in full screen mode. I'm still working on a solution for that. I also added a few quality of life improvements by implementing a sound level slider, a button to reset the tutorial tips, and a button to quit the game. They're not too visually appealing at the moment, so that will be a problem that I have to work on in the future. And speaking of the tutorial tips, that was another important change that I had to make. In the previous build, I had simply written the controls out and put them on the screen. However, there were some big problems with this. Parts of the game or the background covered up the text. At best, it was hard to read, and at worst, it was downright distracting. Besides, after you've learned the very simple controls for this game, you don't really need to keep seeing that information. So I created a new system that would track the player's game progress and only show them gameplay tips when they need them. Adding in the option to reset the tutorial tips at any time meant the player could go back and review them easily without all that unnecessary clutter on the screen. The next big problem in the game was the player's jump. It was really floaty and there was absolutely no variation in jump height possible. Pressing the spacebar would make the player jump exactly the same every time, no matter how long you hold the key. Some people might say that this is a feature of most endless runner games, but in my game this was causing a lot of problems. Firstly, the platforms in my game are randomly generated, which means you can't predict what kind of obstacles will be coming at you next. There could be several very short platforms all spawned in a row, or there could be a much bigger gap between longer platforms. Without the ability to adapt to these differences, the player was very limited. It was extremely difficult to jump upwards along the branching platform paths, because the jumps would have to be timed just perfectly in order to land on the rising platforms, and the player would not be able to land on all the platforms if they were too close together, making those spawned platforms essentially useless. So I added an extra check to my jump to determine if the player was holding or letting go of the jump button. This gave the player a much more responsive jump, resulting in more freedom to follow either path and giving the player more control overall. In an endless runner game, the jump is one of the only things that the player can control, so it needs to be really good. Next, I wanted to fix the power-up system. In the original release of the game, these cloud power-ups would be created randomly after the player reached at least 500 distance in the game. I originally set it up this way because I didn't have too much time and I just needed to get it working. But now that I had the chance to revisit it, I decided that it would be a good opportunity to create a system that could be expanded in the future. The coins were not really serving any purpose in the game. I mean, it's always fun to grab a coin, but what could the player actually do with them? So I changed the system where the player could use the coins that they gather to purchase the cloud power-up. This also involved managing the power-up state differently in order to prevent overlapping purchases, getting multiple power-ups stuck on the screen at the same time. Now we'll be able to add more power-ups into the game on the next update. And that just about covers it. The new updated version 1.1 of Fancy a Run is on my itch.io page. You can head on over and give it a try. I'd love to hear what you think. Until next time, thanks for watching.